Okay, so today we are going to finish up our... Remember, I don't want to talk over you because I don't feel awesome today. We're going to go over our reading graphs. So on Friday, we just did all of our normal graphs. We only did 4 of them, but we took a lot of notes and did a lot of vocab. Today, we're going to be on the back side now. So did we talk about in behavior on Friday? With odd and even?
No. Oh, yeah, we did.
Yeah, when I had you draw those 2 things, did we do this? Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about that some more today. But we are going to look at this graph. So it's not in your notes, pretty much. I think all the notes you have to take are going to be on that worksheet. So I don't think you're going to have to write anything into your notebook today. So this graph is not on your worksheet at all, but we want to talk about it for a little bit. Okay? So I have a question for you. How many times does this intersect the x-axis? How many times does it go through the x-axis?
Uno.
Is it 1 time or 2 times?
No, because...
Okay, so I have a question. If it goes through the x-axis or if it intersects at 1 time, isn't that just a line? Didn't we draw that? Is this graph a line? No. Okay. So then, if it goes through the x-axis 2 times, wasn't that a quadratic? Is this a quadratic? This is a quadratic? Is it? Let's look at our ends. Is that a quadratic? Okay, so then does it go through 1 time or 2 times? Or does it go through not either of those times?
None.
Okay, so let's agree. It goes through at least once, right? Where are we saying it goes through at? Which one? Is it at -1 or 2? What are we talking about? Okay, so let's refine our definition a little bit. So where does the graph go all the way through the x-axis from one side to the other? At +2. Okay, can we all agree on that?
Yes.
And can we agree that something weird is happening at -1?
Yes.
Okay, we can't figure out, is it go through there? What's happening? It just touches it and it kind of like bounces, right? It's like when I go to Target and I have no money, I got to go right back out the door and I can't go inside, so I get to the door and stop. So I kind of stand and then turn back around, right? That's what's happening here. So it doesn't... Huh?
I said, you didn't want to explain that.
So does my graph go all the way through at this point? No, but it does touch the x-axis. Can we agree on that part at least? Okay, so I go through all the way at 2 and I just touch it at -1. I know it's not a line. I know it's not a parabola. What else could it be? What's the next graph that we did on Friday? This was like on the table from your notes that we made. Remember that 5-row table? It's not a line. It's not a quadratic. Does that look like a cubic? Does it kind of look like what we drew for a cubic, though? Yeah, it looks more like a cubic. It's kind of snaky, and then it goes... The ends go in the opposite direction, right? So, how many intercepts did a cubic have? 3. So I've accounted for 1 and 2 of them. So where's the third one at? No, that's a y-intercept. Maybe, how about if I give you the equation? Do you think that'll help?
Hopefully.
Maybe, we'll see. Here's the equation. I have f of x equals x plus 1 quantity squared times x minus 2. And I'm not walking around right now because A, I don't want to get you sick, and B, if you're still sick, I don't want more germs, so I'm going to stay here today. So I have f of x equals x plus... So sorry to you all in the front, you might get sick. F of x equals x plus 1... Here, I'll move back. Quantity squared times x minus 2. Okay, so this x plus 1 quantity squared... How does that correspond to my graph? Where can I find that? What do you mean -1, Danielle? Yeah, because okay, so you're telling me that this is a root at x equals -1? Okay, do we agree with her? Okay, now what about that x minus 2? So that means my root is x equals +2, right? So what do I notice about this equation compared to all the equations I had on Friday? Is it the same or are there any differences? Or maybe the factors that I wrote. Let's look at some of the factors that we had. Or what do I notice about this that's something I've never seen before in a graph? The what? Yeah, the x plus 1 is squared. Do you all see that? I have a square right there. Have I seen that on any of my factors yet? No. So if x plus 1 is squared, that means something weird is happening at -1. So how many roots do you think I have at that point then? What is the exponent? 2. So how many roots do I have?
2.
Okay, so the exponent is what? The exponent is 2. So that means I have 2 roots, okay? So you see how I bounce right there? Or it just touches and turns back around like a magnet? You ever try to put a magnet together with the two same sides facing and then they don't want to touch each other? Or do you not play with magnets anymore because you have phones? Okay, you know what I'm talking about with a magnet when you try to put the two sides together and they keep repelling? That's kind of what's happening right here, okay? So, at any point where I have a bounce like that, we're going to call it a bounce, or where it touches the x-axis. That means I have 2 roots there. It's called even multiplicity, okay? Multiplicity just means how many times it's happening, okay? Does that make sense? Yeah. So on Friday, all of our graphs went all the way through, right? Now we're going to talk a little bit more about multiplicity. So we answered these questions just now. We talked about the intercepts. So we're going to look at our notes, okay? So on the back side from Friday, there should be 8 graphs. We're going to start with number 5. It says, list the roots of the function below. So can you help me out? Where are my roots at? What numbers are they at? -1. And where else? +2. Okay, and what happens at one of those? There's something funky. It doesn't cross through the 2. It bounces at 2, right? Okay, so what does that mean is happening at 2? There are multiple roots. So that means I have 2 roots. Okay, so when I have an even multiplicity, that means I have 2 roots. So do you remember how we write our roots from Friday? How? How do we write roots? X equals whatever our numbers are. So what are they? -1. Then what? +2. Do I have a root at -2, Diego? I have 2 roots at +2. So I can write +2 twice. You see I have 3 roots now? 3 different numbers? Yeah. 2 of them are the same, okay? So that's one way of writing our roots. Another way is I can write x equals -1, comma 2, and then 2 is my one with multiple roots. So we can write multiplicity 2 because there are 2 of them there. Does that make sense? So you can write the root twice, or you can write multiplicity 2 to say that there are 2 roots there. Now, can I write x equals -1, comma 2 squared? Why not?
Because that means it's...
Yeah, what is 2 squared? 4. Do I have a root at 4? No, then you can't write that. So I can write x equals -1, 2 multiplicity 2, or x equals -1, 2, 2. Those are both acceptable answers. Is that okay? I prefer to write it with multiplicity, so that's how I will write it. However, on a quiz, if you wrote this, I'm not going to mark you wrong, okay? But I do need you to recognize both because it may show up in any form on anything that I give you, okay? On number 6, what does it say? List the factors, okay? So do you remember how to write factors from Friday? How? That wasn't a factor. That was close. That was one of the things we did on Friday. It's going to be x plus or minus our number. The one you said is our intercept. We'll get to that one. Okay, so do you agree my roots are at -2 and 3? Yes or no? Yes. Okay, so that means that my root is -2. And what happens at -2? It bounces. So we have 2 roots. And then my other one is at 3. So what are each of those factors? What's my first factor then? What's my first corresponding factor right here? X what? Okay, x plus 2. And then how many of those do I have? 2, because I bounced. So I can write x plus 2 times x plus 2. Or what's another way of writing x plus 2 times x plus 2? You can write x plus 2 quantity squared. Okay, and isn't that how we saw it on the very first example that I showed you? Okay, and then what's my last factor? X plus 3? X minus 3, okay? So, will I accept either one of these answers? Yes, okay? Now, but Miss Audette, you just said I can't write 2 squared. You're right. As a root, you can't write it squared. But as the factor, you can, because I'm saying that there are 2 factors and they're at the same place, okay? So, when we're talking about multiplicity, the only place you can write the square is if you have it for factors, okay? Ready for our next 2? Okay. So I have 7 and 8. Number 7, now it says list the x-intercepts. How do I write x-intercepts? X, comma, 0. Whatever the number is, comma, 0. Okay. So how many intercepts do I have here? I have 3 numbers, but what happens at one of them? It bounces. So how many do I have total? So right here I have 1, and then I have 2, and then I have 1 again. So what's 1 plus 2 plus 1? What? I have 1 root, 2 roots, and 1 more root. So how many roots do I have total? 4. Okay, if I have 4 roots, what was the name of that graph? Quartic. Remember? Quartic. And if you look, yes, it has the correct end behavior. It both goes in the same direction, and it kind of looks like a W. Okay, so my first x-intercept is going to be negative 3, comma 0. Do you agree with that? What is my next x-intercept? Negative 1, comma 0. Then what? Do you say write it to the second power? Well, since it's an intercept, we can't square it. So we can just write it twice or write multiplicity 2. So the only time we write it to the second power is if we have a factor. Factors can be written to the second power. And my last one is 3. Our last one on here is list the zeros of the function below. So what are my zeros? X equals negative 1, and how many are there? 2, so I'm going to write multiplicity 2. What's my next 0? Positive 2, and how many do I have there? 2, so I'm going to write multiplicity 2 again. And what else do I have? 3, and how many do I have there? 1, so I'm just going to write it like that, okay? So in total, I have 3 distinct roots, so 3 different ones. But how many actual roots are there? 5, because I have 2, 4, and 1 more makes 5. So what's the name when I have 5 roots? Quintic. And if you look, the end behavior goes in opposite directions. Is that okay so far? Okay, we have 4 more. This is the last thing we're going to do for today. And I think these ones are a little bit easier. I don't know, though, because my first few classes don't know how to add. So we'll talk about that right now. Yeah, we'll see. They all made the same mistake and said I confused them. So we'll see if I can confuse you again. So now I've been confusing you. I have what is called an origin root. What is the origin when I have a graph? 0, 0. So do you see how I have a point that goes through at 0, 0? That means I have an origin root there, okay? So my other roots are at negative 1 and 3. Do you agree with me? Okay, so I have negative 1, 0, and 3. So this says, what are the x-intercepts? Negative 1, 0, 0, 0, and 3, 0. So we're going to write that. And now I want to write these as factors. So how do I write negative 1, comma 0 as a factor? How do I write these as factors? It's x minus 1? This means my zeros are x equals -1, 0, and 3. So how do I write factors from that? Okay, x plus 1, what else? It is 0, so I have x plus 0. And then what? X minus 3. Okay, now I have a question for you. What is x plus 0? Oh. Close. Yes, some of you know. That's where I tricked my first two classes. What's 1 plus 0? What's 1,000 plus 0? What is -15 plus 0? Then what is x plus 0? Thank you. It's not 0. X plus 0 is just x. Does that make sense? Okay, so if I want... Are you guys okay back there? If I want to rewrite that, x plus 0 is just x, okay? So I can write x plus 1 times x minus 3 and just throw in an x in front, okay? Does that make sense? Okay. If you left it as an x plus 0, am I going to mark you wrong? No, but you will literally never see that anywhere. So please don't do that. But also please don't forget that x is a factor, because that's another mistake that happens, okay? So now we're going to look at the next four. So number 9, it says list the solutions of the function below. So remember, my solutions are my zeros, my roots, wherever my answer is. So what are my roots of number 9? What are my solutions? X equals what? -2, -1, and 0. That's it. That's the answer. Okay? But I do have an origin root right there, so I need to remember it. On number 10, it says write the equation of the function below. Miss Ade, you haven't showed us how to write an equation. You're right. So we're going to start with our roots, which is where we always start. Okay, so what are my roots? X equals what? -1, 0, and 2, multiplicity 2. Is that what I heard? Okay, good. Now, to write an equation, I have to write factors. So how do I write x equals -1 as a factor? X plus 1, good. How do I write 0 as a factor? X plus 0, which we can also write as x, so we'll bring that one out to the front. And then what about 2 multiplicity 2 as a factor? X minus 2 quantity squared, right? So I just wrote the factors, didn't I? What am I asking you to write, though? Equation. So we're going to pop on a f of x equals, and that's the equation. Okay. So the equation is f of x equals whatever the factors are, okay? Is this okay so far? Okay, we have 2 more. 2 more. And I think this is on the quiz. I don't remember because I made it last year, but I'll check. If not, it'll definitely be on the test, so... Okay, last 2 that we have. 11 says list the solutions of f of x of the function below. So what are my solutions on number 11? What? Okay, 0 is a solution, and 1 is a solution, but how do I write that correctly? X equals 0. And what's happening at 0? It is 0 multiplicity 2. Do you see how it bounces at the origin? So you can write 0, 0, 2, or sorry, 1, or 0 multiplicity 2, 1. Is that okay? And then finally, on number 12, it says write the equation of the function below. How do we write the equation? F of x equals the factors. So what's my first factor? What's this number right here? Okay, good. So here's my root is -5. What's my next root? -2. What's my next root? And what's my last root? 3. Okay, so let's write this in factored form. Help me out. What is -5 as a factor? X plus 5, then what? X plus 2, then what? X plus 0, and what do I do with that? Just pop an X up on the front, and what about my last one? X minus 3, and I have to do equals f of x. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. I have one more thing that I need you to copy into your notes. You can put it onto the blank half sheet from Friday. But as you're doing that, can you show me out of 5, how do you feel about graphing with multiplicity? Or reading graphs with multiplicity? Okay, what about origin root graphs? And what about just reading graphs in general? So everything we've done since Friday. Okay, I hope you still feel good about this later. I need you to write this into your notes. So odd multiplicity, listen, don't hang your head like that. Odd multiplicity, it crosses at the x-intercept. Even multiplicity, it bounces. So really all you need to write is this box, draw a sketch, this box, draw a sketch, okay? And I would write the equations to go with it just so you remember what they are. But just sketch that in. You can put it with the rest of your table from Friday, okay? Oh, whoops, sorry.